Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into some fascinating stuff today. The Tavistock Institute.
Oh, this is going to be good.
On the surface, it seems pretty normal. Research, organization, social change, that kind of thing.
Right, right.
But some of the sources you sent, they paint it as a bit more influential. Let's just say that.
A bit more, yeah.
So are we about to uncover some kind of massive conspiracy here?
Well, the sources you sent over really, really dig into the history of this place.
Okay.
The Tavistock Institute, they go way back, even further back than when it officially started in 1947.
Okay.
They point to something called Wellington House, 1913.
Wellington House, what was that all about?
Basically, from what these sources say, a propaganda hub during World War I
Okay.
to get the British public on board with, fighting Germany.
Well, I mean, propaganda during wartime, it's not exactly a new thing, is it?
No, not at all. But it's who they say was involved with this Wellington House that gets interesting.
Okay, who are we talking about?
Lords Rothmere and Northcliffe.
Okay.
Powerful media guys.
Right.
Controlled a lot of the newspapers in Britain at the time. And then you've got intellectuals like Arnold Toynbee.
Oh, wow.
Walter Lippmann. Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, some might say.
Wow, these are big names.
Yeah, and they knew how to shape public opinion. They knew what they were doing.
So these sources are suggesting that Wellington House was very successful then.
That's what they say, yeah. And that success, they claim that's what led to Wellington House becoming the Tavistock Institute
Okay.
in 1921.
Right.
They even connect it to the Federal Reserve being established that same year.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Connecting the Tavistock Institute to the Federal Reserve, that seems a little bit far-fetched, don't you think?
Yeah, that's definitely raising some eyebrows. But let's keep going.
Okay.
Let's see where these sources take us.
And so what happened next?
Well, they claim that the Tavistock Institute, from there, they went on to play a significant role in shaping world events.
Okay.
Major world events. World War II, even the Cold War.
Orchestrating world wars. I mean, come on, that sounds like something out of like a spy movie.
Yeah.
How could one organization have that much power?
Yeah, it's a bold claim, no doubt.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily present like hard evidence,
Yeah.
to prove they directly orchestrated anything.
Right.
But they do highlight specific historical patterns, events, and they say, look, this points to Tavistock's influence.
Okay, I'm intrigued now, but before we jump into specific events, I mean, what about their methods? How did they supposedly pull this off?
Well, they say Tavistock employed some pretty sophisticated techniques, mind control.
Oh, wow.
Social engineering. They claim it all started during World War I with research on shell shock.
Shell shock. Like what soldiers experienced in the trenches. What's that got to do with mind control?
Well, the sources suggest they use this early research on psychological trauma not just to treat soldiers, but to understand and possibly exploit human psychology.
Okay, so they're studying how trauma affects the mind.
Right.
But with like ulterior motives? That's kind of disturbing.
Yeah, and they claim Tavistock developed even more sophisticated methods over time, including some alleged brainwashing techniques that were supposedly used on American prisoners of war during the Korean War.
Brainwashing POWs? That sounds like a Cold War thriller or something.
Right.
Like, do they give any specific examples of how this brainwashing supposedly worked?
They point to the work of a guy named Kurt Lewin,
Okay.
social psychologist associated with the Tavistock Institute. And they say he was instrumental in developing the concept of group dynamics.
Group dynamics, you mean like how people behave and interact in groups?
Exactly. And they allege that Lewin's work on group dynamics was basically weaponized, used to develop techniques for manipulating individuals within controlled environments, influencing their beliefs, their behaviors.
It sounds a bit vague.
Okay.
Do they give any concrete examples of how this manipulation through group dynamics actually worked?
Well, they point to things like workplaces,
Yeah.
schools,
Right.
even just social groups.
Right. Yeah.
They say by manipulating the dynamics within these groups, they could influence the overall beliefs and actions of the individuals within them.
So it's like taking peer pressure and amplifying it to a whole new level.
So that's one way to put it.
It's pretty unsettling.
It does raise some concerns, for sure, about the potential for manipulation in seemingly ordinary settings.
Yeah.
And they don't stop there.
Okay, so where do they go from there?
They go on to link Tavistock to the CIA's MKUltra program.
MKUltra.
Yeah.
The CIA's mind control program. How how do they connect Tavistock to that?
They suggest that LSD experimentation, that was a shared interest, maybe even a point of collaboration. They say Tavistock was really into researching LSD, maybe as part of their broader exploration of mind control.
Wow. Okay. LSD, brainwashing, Korean War POWs. This is getting a little dark.
Yeah, it's definitely some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to remember that these are just claims being made in these sources.
Right.
Got to be critical, consider other perspectives, all that.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not taking these claims as fact, but even if we take some of the more out there stuff with a grain of salt, it still makes you think.
Yeah.
I mean, about the potential for manipulation
Absolutely.
of lives.
Yeah, these sources, they raise some really important questions about how much control we really have over our own thoughts, beliefs, even our actions.
A little scary, honestly.
It is.
Okay, so they've painted this picture of Tavistock as this master manipulator, right? Pulling strings behind the scenes, going all the way back to World War I.
Yeah.
But how does this play out in the U.S.? I mean, do they get into that?
Oh, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, they claim that Tavistock's reach extends deep into American society, influencing institutions, foundations, even individuals in positions of power.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. What kind of institutions are we talking about here?
Well, they highlight a few key players. One is the Stanford Research Institute, SRI.
Okay.
They allege that SRI has been involved in what they call future sciences.
Future sciences? What does that even mean?
Yeah, it's a little vague, but they suggest it involves things like mind control research.
Hold on. SRI,
Yeah.
the place known for, like, cutting-edge technology, they're involved in mind control research.
That's what these sources claim. They also point to another organization called the National Training Laboratories, NTL.
NTL, okay. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah. According to these sources, they've been involved in training leaders in government, education, business.
Right.
But with a twist.
Okay.
They claim that NTL uses brainwashing techniques
Whoa.
to shape the thinking of these leaders, influence their decision-making.
So they're basically molding the minds of the people in power. That's a pretty bold accusation.
It is. And they don't stop there.
Okay, so who else?
They go on to name other organizations like the Institute for Policy Studies, or IPS, and the RAND Corporation.
The RAND Corporation. That's a pretty well-known think tank. I mean, what are they being accused of?
Well, according to these sources, both IPS and the RAND Corporation, they say they've been involved in shaping U.S. foreign and domestic policies in ways that align with Tavistock's alleged agenda. They even suggest that RAND was involved in developing strategies for nuclear war.
Wow.
Influencing intelligence agencies.
So they're painting this picture of Tavistock as this, like, puppet master controlling institutions and individuals at the highest levels of American society.
Yeah.
Do they ever get any more specific about who these individuals are?
They do name a few, one of them being Henry Kissinger.
Kissinger? Serious?
Yeah, the former Secretary of State.
Right.
They claim he received training from a prominent figure associated with Tavistock.
This is like a real-life conspiracy thriller now.
It does have a certain intrigue to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And it makes you think back to that famous warning from President Eisenhower, about the dangers of a scientific technological elite influencing public policy.
Right, the military-industrial complex speech.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about that warning in the context of these claims about Tavistock.
It is. And, speaking of elites and their alleged influence, there's one claim in these sources that's particularly, well, let's just say it's out there.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with it.
They allege that the Tavistock Institute was involved with the Beatles.
The Beatles. You're kidding, right? The band that sang about peace and love. What on earth would they have to do with an organization like Tavistock?
I know, right? It sounds crazy. But buckle up. We're about to dive into one of the most controversial and intriguing claims these sources make.
Okay, all right. I'm all ears. Let's unpack this Beatles connection.
All right. So these sources, they suggest that the Beatles, despite their image as these peace-loving musicians, they were actually tools used by Tavistock and intelligence agencies to further this agenda of social control.
Okay, I'm officially lost now. How could a band that's preaching peace and love, how can they be used for social control? That seems completely contradictory.
I get your skepticism. Yeah, it's definitely a head scratcher. But the sources claim that Tavistock was incredibly savvy at recognizing and exploiting cultural trends to achieve its goals. They argue that the Beatles' popularity, especially among young people, it presented this unique opportunity to influence an entire generation.
So are they saying that Tavistock somehow created the Beatles? Like orchestrated their rise to fame?
Not necessarily. They acknowledge the Beatles' talent, of course.
Right. But they suggest that their meteoric rise, that it was carefully guided, amplified by powerful forces working behind the scenes.
So it's like they were manipulating the music industry to promote a band that would help them achieve their goals.
That's what these sources suggest, yeah.
Yeah.
They claim that Tavistock, other intelligence agencies, they had their fingers in the pie, so to speak, using their influence to shape the Beatles' career, make sure their message reached a global audience.
But what was so special about their message? I mean, they sang about love, peace, understanding. How does that fit into a plan for social control?
The sources argue that it wasn't so much the explicit content of the music, but the cultural movement that they represented, the counterculture of the 1960s.
The counterculture, but that was all about like rebellion, breaking free from societal norms, embracing individual freedom. How could that possibly serve Tavistock's agenda? That's where things get really interesting. The sources, they propose this rather controversial theory. They claim that the counterculture, despite its outward appearance of rebellion, it was actually a carefully orchestrated social experiment engineered by Tavistock.
Whoa.
To destabilize society, to create the conditions for a new form of control.
Hold on. So they're saying that the whole like peace and love movement, that was a setup.
It is. It's a wild theory, I know. But remember, we're exploring these sources. We're not necessarily endorsing them.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
But I'm still struggling to understand how a movement that promoted individuality and freedom, how could that be used for control? It seems like a paradox.
Well, the sources argue that the counterculture, while appearing to champion individual freedom, it actually paved the way for a more subtle form of control. Control through cultural manipulation, consumerism, the erosion of traditional values. They suggest that by encouraging rebellion against the existing power structures, Tavistock was able to create a vacuum.
That they could then fill with their own agenda.
So they're basically saying that by tearing down the old system, they could build a new one in its place.
Right.
A system that they would control. It's like a controlled demolition of society.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And they claim that the Beatles were a key part of this controlled demolition. Their music, their image used to promote the counterculture's ideals.
Okay.
And to accelerate this societal shift.
But how could they control a movement that was supposedly all about breaking free from control? It seems impossible.
The sources suggest that the counterculture, while having genuine roots, in a desire for social change, it was ultimately infiltrated.
Okay.
Manipulated by those with hidden agendas. They claim that Tavistock, other intelligence agencies, they used their influence to shape the direction of the movement, promote certain ideas, certain leaders, while suppressing others. So they're basically saying the whole thing was a sham, like a fake revolution designed to usher in a new form of tyranny.
That's a rather extreme interpretation, but it's the direction these theories point towards. They suggest that the counterculture was ultimately co-opted, steered towards goals that served the interests of the elite, not the masses.
I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around this. It's hard to imagine the Beatles, who seemed so genuine in their message of peace and love, being used as pawns in this elaborate scheme.
I understand your hesitation. It is a difficult pill to swallow, especially for those of us who, grew up admiring the Beatles, their music. But the sources argue that even the most well-intentioned individuals, movements, they can be manipulated by those with enough power and cunning.
Okay, so let's say, just for the sake of argument, let's entertain this theory.
Okay.
What kind of evidence do these sources offer? I mean, do they have any smoking guns?
They point to a few things. One of them being the Beatles' sudden and explosive rise to fame. They question how a band from Liverpool could achieve such global stardom so quickly without some powerful forces behind them.
But isn't it possible that their success was just due to their talent?
Oh, yeah.
and the changing musical landscape of the time. The 60s were a period of immense cultural upheaval, and the Beatles' music, it resonated with a generation yearning for something new.
Those are valid points, and we certainly can't discount the Beatles' talent or the cultural zeitgeist of the era. But the sources argue that their rise to fame, it was too perfectly timed, too orchestrated
Okay.
to be purely coincidental. They also point to the Beatles' connections to certain individuals with alleged ties to intelligence agencies, suggesting that these connections were more than just casual acquaintances.
So they're saying that the Beatles were surrounded by people who were secretly pulling the strings. But wouldn't a band as famous as Beatles naturally have connections to all sorts of people, including those in government and intelligence circles?
Of course, yeah. It's important to consider alternative explanations and avoid jumping to conclusions. But the sources argue that these connections, when combined with other factors, they raise questions about the extent to which the Beatles' careers were truly their own.
Okay, I'm willing to keep an open mind. What other factors are we talking about?
Well, they also point to the recurring themes of rebellion,
Okay.
social change, questioning authority that permeates the Beatles' music, particularly their later work. They suggest that these themes, while seemingly aligned with the counterculture's message of freedom, were actually carefully crafted to destabilize traditional values and institutions, paving the way for a new order controlled by the elite.
So they're saying that even the Beatles' music, which seemed to champion peace and love, was actually part of this grand scheme to manipulate and control society.
That's the implication, and it's a tough one to swallow, I know. But the sources, they argue that we need to look beyond the surface, to decode the hidden messages embedded within popular culture.
It's all starting to feel a bit like the Matrix, like we're living in a simulated reality where nothing is what it seems.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of the Matrix, there's one more piece of evidence that the sources point to as a smoking gun in this alleged plot to control society through the Beatles. John Lennon's assassination.
Whoa, John Lennon's assassination. That was a tragedy, a senseless act of violence. How could that possibly be connected to this theory?
The sources, they suggest that Lennon, in his later years, he became increasingly outspoken in his criticism of government and intelligence agencies. They claim he was becoming aware of the manipulation that he and the Beatles had been subjected to, and he was starting to speak out against it.
So they're saying he was killed because he knew too much. Because he was a threat to the establishment.
That's what these sources imply, yeah. They argue that his assassination wasn't just a random act of violence, but a deliberate act designed to silence him, to send a message to others who might dare to question the official narrative.
Well, this is getting really dark. I mean, to think that someone would be assassinated for speaking out against the government. That's straight out of like a dystopian novel.
It is a chilling thought, and it's important to approach these claims with caution, but the sources argue that Lennon's death, it was a turning point, a stark reminder of the lengths to which powerful forces might go to maintain control.
This whole Beatles connection is mind-boggling. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about them.
It certainly challenges our assumptions, doesn't it? And that's one of the things I find most fascinating about these sources. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths and to question the narratives we've been told.
Well, my head is spinning right now. We've gone from propaganda during World War I to alleged brainwashing techniques to a shadowy web of institutions, and now to the Beatles and John Lennon's assassination. I need a moment to process all of this.
I understand completely. It's a lot to take in, but we're not done yet. There's still more to explore, including what these sources have to say about how to resist manipulation and reclaim our autonomy in a world that seems increasingly controlled by unseen forces.
So we've gone down this rabbit hole of alleged manipulation, mind control. It's a lot. It makes you question everything.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that these sources offer some hope. Like what can we actually do to resist this kind of influence? I mean, if it's really as pervasive as these sources claim.
It is interesting because while these sources paint this pretty bleak picture, right?
Yeah.
Powerful forces at work, they also really emphasize individual awareness. and action.
Okay.
They suggest the key to breaking free from these systems of control, it's understanding how they work and then making conscious choices to resist.
So it's not about feeling powerless. It's about reclaiming our power as individuals.
Exactly. Recognizing we're not just passive recipients, just absorbing everything. We're active participants
Right.
in shaping our own realities.
Okay, that's a powerful idea. But how do we put that into practice? How do we actually become more aware, less susceptible?
Well, they emphasize being mindful of our media consumption. We need to be critical of the information we're taking in, not just passively absorbing everything.
So like becoming more discerning
Yeah.
about what we're consuming.
That exactly. They encourage us to ask questions like, who created this message?
Right.
What's their agenda? What techniques are they using, to persuade me?
So it's like becoming a media detective,
Yeah.
analyzing the evidence, looking for clues to uncover the hidden messages and motivations.
That's a great way to put it. And they argue that this critical approach to media, it's crucial for breaking free from those manipulative narratives that are often presented to us.
Okay, that's a good starting point. What else do they recommend?
They also emphasize critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
Going beyond just questioning, but learning how to analyze arguments, identify logical fallacies, evaluate evidence.
So it's about sharpening our minds, training ourselves to think more critically.
Absolutely. They believe critical thinking, it's like the antidote to manipulation.
Yep.
It allows us to see through those deceptive arguments.
Right.
And make decisions based on reason and evidence, not emotion or blind faith.
Makes sense. If we can think for ourselves, we're less likely to be swayed by those tactics.
Exactly. And this ties into another important point they make. Seeking out diverse perspectives.
Diverse perspectives.
Yeah.
So not just staying in our own echo chambers, listening to people who already agree with us.
Precisely. They encourage us to step outside those comfort zones, engage with viewpoints that challenge our own.
I mean, that's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially these days.
It is.
It feels like everyone's like digging in their heels.
Yeah.
Refusing to even listen to the other side.
I understand that. It can be uncomfortable to confront ideas that clash with our own beliefs, but they argue that it's precisely this discomfort that can lead to growth and a deeper understanding.
So being open-minded, even if it's challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. They believe that by exposing ourselves to a wider range of perspectives, we become less susceptible to being manipulated by any single narrative. We start to see the world in a more nuanced, complex way, recognizing that truth is rarely black and white.
Okay, so being critical of what we're consuming, critical thinking skills, seeking out diverse perspectives, these are all important steps. But what about the systems themselves? I mean, these sources claim that there are powerful institutions, individuals working, behind the scenes to manipulate and control us. I mean, can we really fight against that?
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming to think about challenging these systems that seem so vast and powerful. But they believe that real change, it starts at the individual level. They suggest that as more people become aware, of these systems, make conscious choices to resist, it creates this ripple effect that can ultimately lead to systemic change.
So it's not about feeling powerless, but about reclaiming our power as individuals. And then using that power to create a collective shift.
Exactly. They believe that as more people wake up, start making different choices, it will eventually force, those in power to adapt, to change. They see this as a gradual process, a kind of bottom-up revolution that starts with individual hearts and minds.
That's a really hopeful message. It makes me feel like I can actually make a difference, even if it's just in my own small way.
And that's the power of these theories. They may be unsettling, but they also offer a path towards empowerment, towards liberation.
This has been an incredible deep dive. It's challenged my thinking, opened my eyes to new perspectives. I'm still processing all of this, but I feel like I gained some valuable tools for navigating this crazy world.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, the journey doesn't end here. Keep questioning, keep learning, keep pushing the boundaries of your understanding.
I will. And for our listeners who've been on this journey with us, what's one final thought you'd like to leave them with?
I'd encourage them to consider this. If information is power, then the ability to critically evaluate that information, well, that's the key to true freedom.
That's a powerful thought, and one that I think will resonate deeply with our listeners. Thanks so much for guiding us through this fascinating, thought-provoking deep dive.
It was my pleasure. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning.